Welcome to the Winning Edge podcast, where we share focus, fueling, and faith-filled stories and strategies to give young athletes the tools they need to become the best versions of themselves as athletes and individuals.
What you eat and how you think can transform your athletic performance and overall well-being. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or fitness enthusiast looking to gain that mental edge and optimize your health, this podcast is for you. We are your hosts. I'm Lindsay, former collegiate athlete, coach, educator, and educational coach for over 20 years, and a mom of 2 young athletes.
And I'm Stacy, registered dietitian nutritionist of over 18 years and also a mom of 2 young athletes. Today, we're going to be talking about a topic that as a dietitian, sports nutritionist, I think is really relevant to a lot of our listeners who have either middle or high school athletes or who have middle or high school athletes asking them about, hey, can we go to the grocery store and buy these supplements or these things that I want to bulk up for this summer? Because, summer's a great time for getting stronger and putting in the work and really training during the off season to reap some physical gains. And so we're talking about supplements. We're talking about what supplements can be beneficial to health, what supplements maybe have a good marketing or a lot of noise around them, but aren't as beneficial. And so, Lindsay, I think we're going to be jumping into what do most people want to know?
Absolutely. And I think it's really important too, especially because a lot of our kids that are going into football season right now and trying to bulk up, going into that freshman year or just prepping for those 2-a-days, I think it's a really good time.
Well, it's not even limited. I would say we see it from our football players, but my neighbor just today swung by and dropped some things off and was like, hey, I'm headed to the grocery store. Can you tell me what supplements I need to get for my son? And he's a basketball player. So he's thinking about how do I get bigger, faster, stronger? I can tell you the baseball players that my son plays with that are in high school or even middle school are looking at how do I get bigger, faster, stronger? And I think in a day and age where there's a lot more information being pushed, whether it's like out on YouTube or whether it's in TikTok or the social forums that our kids are spending time in, there's a lot of marketing.
Right. And I think you and Jessica brought this up on the podcast that we had recently, where she was saying that, all of these athletes now are making money off of marketing and supporting products. A lot of times those products, they're not even sure what's in them or what they're promoting. And younger athletes are looking at that and seeing like, wow, there's a lot of people are using this product and I've heard all these great reviews, but none of the information is being backed up by actual dietitians and nutritionists that know what they're talking about.
Or pharmacists or someone who has expertise in this. So there's a couple of categories, and I'm just going to kind of lay this out, I think, for our listeners. There are categories of supplements that I would say are ultimately beneficial to health. And then there's a lot of supplements out there that, again, have a lot of good marketing around them. They're popular. Kiddos are talking about these families, but we don't see as much research or the substantial research that's needed to truly recommend these in a safe format to athletes. One of the big ones, and let me first disclaimer, because I think when I talk about these, what I want to say first as a sports dietitian is that the general guidelines I would give to any athlete or their family is to always prioritize whole foods first. We should be eating more fruits and vegetables, more lean proteins, more whole grains. Like we need more fiber. The average American is not consuming enough fiber, and that can vary whether you're a male or female and depending on your age. My brother said to me one time, I eat an apple a day. Is that good enough? I'm like, there's 6 grams of fiber in an apple. And as a grown man, you need closer to 30. And so it's like this epiphany of like, oh, I always heard an apple a day. And it's like, there's a lot of sayings out there, but prioritizing whole foods first, making sure that you're getting the right macros and micros, calories that are prescribed to you. I cannot tell you enough how many young kiddos I see using supplements, and those supplements are either making them feel full or not making them feel hungry, like pre-workouts. And so they're not hitting their calorie needs. And at the end of the day, the one thing I can tell you that I hope if you hear anything, this drives home, if you're getting too many calories or you're not getting enough calories, that is going to impact how your body is able to gain weight or lose weight. And so for those that are looking to lose weight, if you overconsume calories, who cares about the macros? Who cares about anything else? You're going to gain weight. For those that are wanting to bulk up, if you are inhibiting the calorie needs that your body needs to build, you will not be able to build muscle. So whole foods first, making sure you're getting the right calories, macros, and micros for fueling, recovery, and hydration. The second thing would be if you are going on a supplement plan, because there are so many supplements out there, and we'll talk a little bit about what to look for, make sure that you talk to someone, be it your pediatrician, your family physician, a sports dietitian, a sports pharmacist. It's part of why we had Jessica on in a prior episode, is like there are resources out there, and many of them have free information like we do online that you can access. We actually just launched, Lindsay, Facebook Ask Me Anything, and a TikTok.
Our group. Yeah, the TikTok one is the oh my gosh, the subscribers.
Yeah.
That one, and we haven't put anything on there yet, but this could be something that we kind of start with, is maybe the information.
I love it. And it's like $2.99 a month or something. We created a forum. So if you want to ask us really personal questions, but you're like, hey, I don't want to pay for a consult, or I don't want to pay for the time, I just have a question, come visit us on TikTok, or come visit us for free on the Facebook group AMA page. And that's what we started this business for, is to really help our young athletes and families get access to good, credible information that can actually help you be successful. The third one I would say, beyond prioritizing whole foods and consulting with a healthcare professional, would be choose third-party tested supplements so that you're not getting things you don't want. I cannot stress this enough. As a student athlete who is getting ready to transition from high school to college, even who's in a highly competitive, you can be eliminated from competing in your sport if you are consuming supplements that have banned substances. The two that I always recommend to look for are NSF and USP. They're testing for a variety of banned substances in these supplement products so that you can know, you can see NSF or USP certification emblem on package, and we can even post pictures of these.
We can do that. That would be a good graphic for us to put up. It's just the difference.
Yeah. And so you can see, what does the image look like that you're looking for on the front of package, so you can know that the supplement you're buying is actually safe for your athlete to consume. And if they were to get screened or tested, let's just say they're participating in some sort of Olympic pre-trial, or they're out there actually competing and they get screened, that they wouldn't be at risk.
Well, so a lot of parents don't realize too, your kids are subjected, even in high school, for UIL to different drug tests, and it's random. A whole team can be called in to have drug tests all done at the same time, or it could be individual athletes or players. And then in college, that did happen. I remember us getting different athletes on our campus getting drug tested randomly. And it was like, hey, 6 a.m. text, show up at the gym, blah, blah, blah. So I think that that's something important for parents to realize too, because the stuff that we're going to the grocery store and purchasing, it may not be what you think it is, something that you think it is, and can cost you your athletic career or season.
Yeah. And then just be really careful. You're looking for things that are for young athletes. So especially for these middle and high school kids, you want the right dosage for them. And you definitely don't want something that is not, at least at minimum, telling you it doesn't have a supplement facts panel, and it does not have the ingredients list on pack. If those aren't disclosed, those are always big red flags for me. If they don't tell you what's in the product, that's probably not a good sign. So that being said, if we start with those guiding principles, there's sort of some buckets of supplements that I would say may be beneficial. So we'll talk a little bit today about protein powder. I'd love to know your questions, Lindsay. As you think about protein powder, we're going to talk a little bit about vitamin D, because that's one that I would say has some pretty good solid evidence. It also shows up often in our broad national nutrition research that the average American, whether that's adult or child, is not getting enough vitamin D. There's lots of reasons around this. We use sunscreen more often today. We're not outside as frequently, and a lot of our exposure historically comes from, exposure to the sun. We get vitamin D through the rays of the sun. We'll talk about omega-3 fatty acids. More and more research talking about the value of omega-3s to the diet and health, and not just body composition and performance, but also brain and neurological health. Awesome supplement, thinking about holistically taking care of our kiddos, and even as adults. I mean, all of these things we're going to talk about.
And that's what I was going to say too. Like, man, all of this is our mission, right? We're supporting the whole athlete for their lifespan. And I think that this just ties right into that. Like, this is all stuff that is not just for our athletes. It's going to help any listener that's tuned in and hearing that.
Yeah. And I think when I think about some of these vitamins and supplements, these are the ones that are generally considered safe. Most people are probably, even if you're eating a really diverse diet, you may not be getting all of these micronutrients that you need. And the difference between getting the minimum amount you need and getting the optimal amount that you need for well-being is, one means you're going to have, like, I think about vitamin D. So if you're deficient in vitamin D, you're going to have rickets, which is going to have some very clear clinical symptoms. But if you're just depleted in vitamin D, meaning you have low vitamin D, but it's not at an optimal level, you're just going to feel bad and you're not going to perform very well. And so the difference between these is really kind of this sweet space in the middle that we're looking for, that's going to get you to actually feeling your best and performing your best. Another big one is electrolyte supplements. We live in Texas. For our Texas athletes, or those that are in the South that are exercising outside, really making sure that you're not just hydrating with water, but that you're replacing electrolytes as well. And then creatine is one that I love. We're seeing more and more research research in this space around the benefits of creatine, really across for children and for adults in long-term safety, helping promote muscle recovery and overall recovery and performance. But also we've seen more recently, and I know we talked about this with Jessica, brain health and cognition, and they're testing creatine in patients with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
And so
like all of that just really, my grandmother passed away from Alzheimer's, and I know that affects so many people, their parents. And so I think this is a really powerful point to bring up with the creatine.
Yeah. And then we'll talk a little bit about caffeine and energy drinks. This is an interesting one. My husband and I used to do CrossFit workouts, and we used to do some CrossFit competitions. And like one of my favorite quote unquote pre-workouts was like, I would literally drink a Coke or a Diet Coke because it would give me sugar and caffeine. And caffeine research has shown that it can boost VO2 max, basically boosting blood flow to the blood vessels. I will say caffeine for young adults should just be considered in safe because it's not for everyone. It can increase nervousness, sleep disturbances, heart rate. If you're drinking caffeine for a 7 p.m. game and then you're trying to get your athlete afterwards at 9 or 10 o'clock to go to bed,
not going to happen.
It might not be the best thing for you. Yeah. And so especially for younger athletes who really don't need that same boost of energy, or depending on your sport. And caffeine is also a diuretic, meaning it increases how much water you're going to excrete from the body to create that balance. So it can actually leave you being less well hydrated. So just lots of things to take into account. And then we're going to talk a little bit about pre-workout supplements, which is one I do not recommend. This one gets all of the hype. And so we'll talk about the ones we do recommend, but I think caffeine and energy drinks and then pre-workout supplements, those are two that I would just take with a grain of salt. Caffeine can work. It should really be considered with limitations for young kiddos. And then pre-workout supplements, I would highly not recommend for teenagers. Oftentimes kiddos that are taking these as a pre-workout, like they come home and they're taking it before they go into after school practices, it can be something that's actually limiting them from feeling hungry and then eating the food they need to fuel their practice or workout. Or it can cause, jitters. It can cause them to just not get the calories they need throughout their day, which again goes back to they might feel energized for that workout, but then they're not eating the calories they need to actually build muscle for the day. And then another just thing here is a lot of these, again, pre-workout supplements, there isn't one that I would recommend because I don't recommend them, but they can have a lot of additional additives that are not screened for or well evaluated. You could find some that are NSF safe or tested, but I just, again, wouldn't recommend them for young athletes. Okay, so what do we want to dig into first? What questions do you have, Lindsay, as we think about?
I think the biggest thing, right, that I know so many athletes, even athletes in middle school, they use protein powder.
Yeah.
And especially because they've had those challenges on TikTok and all that, where the kids are, like just putting the protein powder right into their mouth. And
dry scooping?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
Okay, we got to talk about this.
So what is going on?
If you are a young athlete, or your young athlete is what we call dry scooping protein, which I did not realize until a couple of years ago this was actually a thing.
Yes.
But it's where they wouldn't mix their protein powder with water or milk. They would literally just put it in their mouth and consume it. And so many red flags on that because of you're not improving hydration. You actually can be really taxing your kidneys. So when we think about protein consumption, our kidneys have to filter and manage all of the uric acid, all of the components that make up what is that protein to the body. And so it can actually be really hard on a child's body to be just dry scooping protein. So I highly do not recommend that for any athletes.
The whole thing grosses me out anyways. I don't understand the point of doing that. But yeah, I've seen even, videos where they're in the locker rooms and they're dry scooping the protein and squeezing the Gatorade bottles into each other's mouths.
Oh my gosh.
Where are your parents? No.
And also teenager, we talked about this with vaping and all the things that you shouldn't be doing. It's your friends are doing it and so you think it's cool. I think for parents who are listening to this and that are really thinking about the implications to their athletes is you're doing all this work. You're working hard physically. You're training mentally. And you're trying to get in good nutrition. And then you're doing this one thing that actually could have a really detrimental impact to your health.
So my biggest question I have for you then with protein powder. So when I was younger, in high school, I was using protein powder that was whey. It was a whey-based protein powder.
Yeah.
And then after my youngest son was born, I started using plant-based protein powder that was made with cranberries and pea protein. So it was a vegan, vegetarian, whatever, based powder. But what would you recommend? Or is there a difference? Or is there something that you should avoid if you're trying to bulk up, or you should use if you're trying to bulk up? What would be your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think that's a good one. And I'm going to kind of dig into like, I'm not going to say prescriptively. I want to kind of back that question up a little bit because
Okay.
I want to talk about what is protein. Protein is basically just made up of amino acids. So amino acids are basically the building blocks that make up protein. There are certain amino acids that we do not make, our body does not naturally make, and we have to get from food. We call those essential amino acids. And so when I think about a plant-based versus what I would call cow's milk or animal-based protein. So 9 times out of 10, it's going to be protein. You'll have casein or whey, which are the dairy-based proteins. Those are the most common ones that you'll find. And then you'll have your plant-based proteins. So your animal-based proteins are going to have all of the essential amino acids that the body needs to actually build and replenish muscle. That being said, your plant-based may be limiting in one or a few, but if you have a fairly well-rounded diet, you could then get all of the amino acids that you need to supplement that. So like a good example of that when we talk to people is beans and rice. So when you think about beans and rice, each one of those is deficient, and I forget the exact amino acids. I think it's like leucine and I'm forgetting the other one, but beans is deficient in one and rice is deficient in the other. But when you stack beans and rice together, they make a complete source of protein. So it's why many like indigenous cultures over the years have eaten beans and rice, because that was like having a chicken breast for dinner. It was getting them all the building blocks that they needed to be able to build and repair and replenish muscle. So what I was getting at with that whole long spiel is that plant-based protein powders are going to have all the essential amino acids. It's not going to matter how good or bad your diet is, you're going to be able to build and recover muscle quickly. Plant-based is going to have those, but it is going to depend on how much of your overall dietary pattern is fully complete. Also, the other call out that I would say is animal-based proteins are oftentimes more bio, meaning your body can access and use them more readily than plant-based proteins. It's the reason why, and I know this gets really confusing, but if you look at a nutrition facts panel on a product, you have what we used to call PDCOS, and now we call it DICOS. And if you're like, oh my gosh, Stacy, I don't know what you're talking about and you've lost me, it basically is, you know, on the nutrition facts panel when it says like percent daily value.
Yes.
So there's a certain daily value of protein you need to hit in a day. That's the recommended daily value. I would argue that daily value on the nutrition facts panel is much lower than what most of our athletes need to get. It's about 50 grams a day. I would say most of our athletes, depending on weight, are going to probably need more than that. They're going to need anywhere from 1.2 to 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight of protein. But that being said, they calculate a digestibility corrected for amino acid score. And if you're like, what is that? It's basically, if you were to have 30 grams of plant protein, only a certain percentage of it is actually digestible and usable by the body. So 30 grams of plant protein is not equal to 30 grams of animal protein. Yes. And oftentimes people don't fully understand all of the conversation around amino acids and rate limiting amino acids. So basically, if you're missing just one essential amino acid that you need to build muscle, you can't effectively build and grow and recover muscle and replenish muscle without that rate limiting. It's the reason why they call it rate limiting. And so it does matter sort of the quality and amount of amino acids that you get throughout your day and making sure that you're not deficient in any one of those essential amino acids.
So if somebody was wanting to use a plant-based protein, then it would really be beneficial for them to work with a nutritionist or a dietitian to make sure that they're getting the other essential amino acids
110%
that they're not getting with color.
And this is, so like generally I would say, and it's not that I would pick one over the other, but I would say whey protein is generally superior when it's on a gram to gram basis because it's got a higher branched chain amino acids. So the BCAAs are they're 3 of the leucine, isoleucine, and valine. They're 3 of the essential amino acids that the body needs. And it's much higher in leucine content, which is critical for building and repairing muscle. If, however, someone is like, I have a dairy allergy, I have a whey allergy, or I have a casein allergy, which are the types of dairy proteins, I would highly recommend that they're working with someone to find not just a plant protein powder, but a plant protein powder that is well tested, that has good bioavailability, that really is a superior product. Because yes, can you support muscle repair and recovery and building with plant-based protein powders? You absolutely can. And for someone who has an allergy, you definitely don't want to be having a GI distress from trying to choke down a whey protein versus like having a really great pea protein based or other plant-based protein that could be much more gut friendly for that person.
But just having a dietitian or nutritionist who can make sure that your menu for the week is getting the rest of those amino acids in that you need in other areas
Oh,
of your nutrition.
102%.
And so I'm not trying to like,
Yeah.
well, I'm going to shamelessly plug you. Like you offer coaching for that purpose.
Yeah, we have, or if we don't do it, we have access to dietitians who are experts in these spaces.
Yes.
And so like we can absolutely, whether it's on our like free Facebook page, whether like you want to engage, like get your kiddo to ask us questions on TikTok. Cause you know, sometimes they don't listen to us as parents, but they'll listen to someone else, which is why we started this. And even my kids don't like to listen to me. And, you know, but they'll listen to a friend of mine who's a dietitian for, you know, whatever sports team that they play for. So
no, I love that. I think that makes me understand it better because for a while I thought, well, so I was told, not by an expert, I was told by someone like whey protein just makes you gain weight. And I was like, oh, okay, well then that's when I switched to the plant-based protein, but that makes sense now. So I'm glad you explained that.
Yeah. They actually like, for someone who's a vegan or who has other reasons why they're wanting a plant-based protein, yes, they can be a solution. But I would say having all of the essential amino acids, having like gram for gram, more branch chain amino acids, which are extremely beneficial to helping build and repair muscles. So that's your leucine, isoleucine, and valine. Those are 3 super important amino acids to the body when it comes to muscle recovery and repair. Animal-based proteins are going to be higher in those naturally, gram for gram. And then the bioavailability, meaning the ability of your body to tap into those amino acids and quickly build and repair muscle, is going to be much faster. Now, you can get into the whole sustainability conversation. What's more sustain? There's a lot of conversations around these spaces, but if we're talking to athletes about gram for gram, what's going to help them build and repair muscle better, and they don't have an egg allergy or a whey allergy or a casein allergy, and again, whey and casein are the 2 different types of dairy proteins, I would encourage them to look for one of those proteins first.
Awesome. Well, I think that's super helpful. Okay, so jump into vitamin D.
Oh, I love vitamin D. I think that's a really good one. And vitamin D, like this is a routine test that if your doctor's not running it, you don't have to pay to go to some fancy doctor. Actually, we do these tests too at SPAN. We can test some micronutrients that we believe are key micronutrients for you. But you can test your vitamin D levels. And ultimately, vitamin D is an extremely important nutrient for supporting bone health and muscle function. It actually even also supports immune health. And again, it just goes back to, I think many adults and children now are more deficient in vitamin D. It's actually one of the nutrients of concern that we address in the dietary guidelines. And so that's because we're using more sunscreen. So we have less sun exposure. We're not outdoors as often. More kiddos are indoors or playing video games or not outside exercising. Or when they are, they're like fully covered in long sleeves. And because we're smarter about skin care and sun care. And so that's not a bad thing. But that also can then mean that they're at greater risk for being vitamin D deficient.
All right. So then vitamin D is something that we need to work on increasing for our athletes. So how would you suggest doing that?
Yeah, I think, again, food first. I would say looking for foods that are high in vitamin D is always a great option. One of the ones that, again, this kind of goes back to, and I really love dairy. And I'll talk about that a lot, but there's a lot of different foods that you can get that actually are a source of vitamin D. So salmon's a great source. For 3 ounces, you can get about 700 IUs, which is the measure that we use to measure vitamin D in the body. Beans, grilled tuna. My kids love tuna steaks. Like this is actually a really good one because we love to like take the frozen 3-ounce tuna steaks and I marinate them like a steak and then we cook them. And for a while, my boys were like, oh, we're having steak for dinner tonight. And it would be like tuna steaks and they wouldn't know. So great source of vitamin D, egg yolks, beef liver. I don't know many people that like
that's
those.
Probably like for most
but again,
kids,
like your fortified milks, most milks today, whether they're plant-based or a cow's milk, are going to be fortified with vitamin D. A lot of cereals are fortified. So if your kiddo likes cereals and that's the way they get their calories and the way they get their fiber in the morning, I mean, that's a good option. Making sure you're not getting too much sugar on that cereal is probably the biggest bet. Some yogurts can be fortified with vitamin D. And then again, just like your plant-based milk. But those are some good natural ways to get it. And then I think those are probably some good ones.
So, and I love that you always come back to using food as the source. Like before you jump to a supplement or something that you can take or pick up as a powder, go to the food. And I love that because I think that's really important for our kids to understand too, that you're not always reaching for a product that's been made.
Well, and I will say, like, I always say foods first, but I will say the list of supplements I've given to this audience who's listening. So whether it's protein powders, vitamin D, omega-3s, electrolytes, creatine, they're all things I take and my kiddos take. And so they're things I feel pretty strongly about. We have a really good, varied diet. I feel like overall we get pretty good nutrition. We're eating fatty fish twice a week. We're consuming lots of fruits and vegetables. We're eating lean proteins at all of our meals. Like we're getting, you know, dairy in throughout our day, with the exception of my oldest one who just like does not love it. But we get it in other ways, yogurt or cheese. But I would say getting it first through food, but then knowing it's okay to take a supplement, just making sure that you're choosing a supplement that you trust. And so one of the ones that we actually take, because there's been more and more research recently around the synergistic effects of D3 plus K2. So D3 actually helps your body absorb calcium from foods or from a supplement. And then K2 helps ensure that calcium is going to the right places, like your bones and your teeth. Stays out of your soft tissues, because when you think about calcium, calcification of arteries is oftentimes what people think about. I would recommend usually a D3 plus K2 if you're taking an over-the-counter vitamin D, or like in milk and a lot of your fortified products, you're going to get D plus calcium. So I like the D3 plus K2. That's probably my favorite.
All right. Why don't you tell us about the omega-3 fatty acids?
Yeah, this is a great one. I would say ultimately, when it comes to fatty acids, we know that, well, when it comes to research, because also I work full time for a grocery store and I see, you know, overall trends of dietary patterns of most Americans. I would say most Americans, we know from the data, aren't consuming fish or fatty fish, the recommended 2 times a week. That is still something I feel like we're trying to beat home with folks. And if fish isn't on your menu, it's just a really great source of bioavailable nutrition that you could be feeding to your families. If you're like, my kids don't like it, there's a lot of different types of fish out there that you can try. There's a lot of different ways to cook it. Heck, even if you air fry it. And that's the only way they'll eat it.
Well, I mean, I know I don't cook it as much, and you know, I'm with you all the time. I should know to be making fish for the kids more often. It's not so I do need to do a better job of that for sure.
And there's a lot of great discounts. Like if you follow the store ads, there's oftentimes a lot of really great fish items that are on ad. But the thing about getting it in the actual, like getting it from fish itself, is that you're going to be getting all of the valuable omega-3 components that you need. So, and this is important because when we talk about what type of supplement should you choose, there's different types of basically supplements that you can take. So when you think about omega-3s, there's EPA and DHA. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce them. It's icosapentaoic acid is the EPA, and docosahexaenoic acid, I'm going to get them all wrong. And then ALA, which is alpha linoleic acid. But they can be found naturally in products. So like your EPA is going to be high in fish, and your DHA is going to be super high in fish and algae. And then your ALA, which actually the body can convert poorly, but it can take ALA and turn it into DHA. You're going to find in things like flaxseed, chia, walnuts. So when people say like, oh, flax seeds are high in omega-3s, you're like, yeah, they're high in ALA, which then the body has to do work and convert to the DHA or EPA. But fish is going to be, or algae, like think seaweed, like the seaweed snacks, or wrapping things in seaweed, which is a very like Japanese cultural thing to do. Those are going to be high in the types of omega-3s that you're looking for. So when you're looking for a supplement of omega-3s, again, you want to find something that is tested and safe, but you really want to look for something that has the EPA, DHA. And I will tell you, like the doses will depend. So like if they're kids anywhere from 4 to 12, you want somewhere from 200 to 500 milligrams of EPA and DHA combined. For teens and adults, you want 500 to 1,000. And then for athletes, you can have ultimately anywhere between 2,000 to 3,000. So like I'll up the dose for my athletes because of what it does for recovery and fueling. If you can get it in the oil form, fish oil. Now, here's the caveat I will say. If you've never actually drinking fish oil, like you're burping it for like 20 minutes afterwards, maybe even longer. And so if you can get it in that form, it's much better absorbed.
Fish oil capsules, though, I swear
you can get them in the
dad
capsules.
used to take capsules of fish oil all the time when I was growing up.
Yeah. So like ultimately you want to look for a product. If you can get it in the oil version, it's usually more readily available for the body to use. I will say most people don't prefer that because it doesn't taste very good. Even if you like chase it with something, you're still kind of burping fish oil for a while, which is why, to your point, most people prefer the like capsulated supplements. So it gets down into the stomach and then it's smelling and tasting like fish oil.
Right.
I wouldn't get like a generic omega-3 with only ALA. I would make sure that you're looking for something that's third-party tested. And then again, I would just know that because it is a fat and these things do oxidize, you want something that's in a dark capsule and you want to be able to store it in a cold, dark place or even refrigerated because these can't oxidize. And then once they do, they're really not beneficial to health. So some important things for omega-3s. They are
really good information.
Really beneficial. And there's probably even more things, but just for sake of time for our athletes, like those would be the things I would look for.
That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. So there's a lot of information. We could talk for hours.
Seriously,
on
I sit and talk with you about this stuff, though, I feel like my head's going to blow off my shoulders because there's just so much information that I just didn't know. I don't know. It's overwhelming, but I love it. So, and then I'll go back and I'll listen to the podcast over and over to like write things down. So.
And again, like these are all things that I feel pretty safe in using. And I mean, again, like for omega-3s, you can go up on the dose for athletes. And so things I feel really good about. And I think know this, if I would say anything about nutrition, this is what I always say. And it's my disclaimer is like nutrition is a very new science. For anyone that tells you like we definitively know this and we don't know this, I'm just going to call their BS. And here's why. Been a dietitian for almost 20 years and it's such a new science. Every day we're learning new things about the science, which is both exciting and also frustrating because every time we learn something new, consumers are like, wait, but 10 years ago you told me this. And it's like, yes, because it's a very new evolving science. It hasn't been around as long as like medicine or pharmacology or other sciences. So we're still learning.
But the stuff that's coming out, it's so much better. The information now is like anything that's from 10 years ago. I don't even care. I want to know like now, like, what do you know? Right? Because I just think it's evolved so much.
Yes and no. So I will say we're kind of getting off on a tangent. We definitely need to talk hydration, but like I will say, and this is where we can have a whole episode and I'd love to bring a researcher on of like, we're learning more, but we still don't research nutrition today the way that we research pharmacological interventions or the way we research medicine. So have we learned a lot about nutrition as a new science? For sure. Do we have a lot more to learn? Yes. And so that's where I would be really leery of someone who is an expert, quote, end quote, on TikTok or another social media that just tells you, no, we know this and it's a fact. And it's like, yeah, there are some things we know. There are some things we're still learning. And always having the humility to say like, hey, yeah, we thought we knew that and we got it wrong because we tested a hypothesis and it was different than we thought. That's a hard place for most people to hold because they're like, wait, you lied to me. And it's like, no, we just became more informed.
Right.
Yeah. So
evolving. All right. So electrolytes.
Yeah. So let's talk hydration. I think this is a key one. Like we know, and we've talked about this before with our athletes, you can perform 30% worse if you're not well hydrated. So think about an athlete going out onto the field who hasn't drinking water all day. They've been inside. They've not been playing. They're going out for 5 and 7 o'clock games. I just sent our oldest off today and I'm like, did you hydrate? You've been out wakeboarding all morning and like doing all the fishing, doing all the stuff.
I was like, I'm fine.
Exactly. And so it's like, well, you got to go out there and perform and you got to perform as catcher and you need to be well hydrated if you want your muscles to do the things you're asking them to do on the field. And so I would say one of the ways that we check for hydration and we can do electrolytes with our athletes is like ask them to weigh pre-post to practice. So we can tell them exactly how much fluid and how much electrolytes they need to replace. Like that's the science of it. For kind of broad recommendations for those that are listening, when you're looking for an electrolyte beverage, you want something that has not just sodium and water, but you want sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, chloride, and phosphorus. And phosphorus is really kind of optional. It can help with energy metabolism and fluid buffering to like helping create the adequate fluid balances in the body, but it's not vital. I will say sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, and chloride, they are vital. And you need those electrolytes for various reasons in your electrolyte beverages. And we can post, and actually it's in our book. If you look in our book, it tells you exactly the ideal ranges of those things that you need. But at the end of the day, they're going to do different functions. So like if you think about sodium's going to help maintain fluid balance. It's going to prevent hyponatremia, which you're like, that's just a fancy word for I drank too much water. I have too much water in my blood versus the electrolytes I need to function. And when you think about something like potassium helps regulate heartbeat. This is why patients that are on medications that are trying to regulate heartbeat are not allowed to be taking potassium salts. Like think about Mrs. Dash. Mrs. Dash is actually, instead of a sodium salt, it's a potassium salt. So these patients can't use Mrs. Dash because they're already taking something to regulate heartbeat. And if they're taking a potassium salt, they're causing that to be exacerbated or in worse condition. So like nutrition's a science. It really is a science and not just a recommendation. Magnesium. So magnesium is really great for supporting muscle relaxation, preventing cramping. So I often find a lot of our electrolyte beverages actually aren't getting adequate amounts of magnesium. So you need anywhere from 30 to 50 milligrams. Be looking for a beverage that has not just sodium and potassium, but also magnesium. And then calcium. So calcium helps with muscle contraction, nerve signaling, and chloride, which can help kind of balance with sodium to make sure that you have adequate fluid balance. And you need all of these things in different levels, but ultimately looking for an electrolyte beverage that has the right ratios of those things that you need. Or one of the ones that I love is like they make the Gatorlight, or they make some of the like rapid rehydrate ones. If you're dehydrated, those are really great. Here's my caveat for those. Those are not a hydration strategy. Those are what I would call a mitigation strategy. So when you're already dehydrated and you need to rapidly rehydrate, that's what you use them for. They shouldn't be what your athlete is reaching for all the time, because they don't have a game plan in place to be well hydrated.
And I know you've told me in the past, and I'm pretty sure you've said it on the podcast before too, that anything over 45 minutes of intense workout is when you should be bringing in things like the Gatorade, right? And not just the water, but always the water is to be like the first.
Yes. And you actually just brought up something I think we've talked about before on a podcast. And I think we talked about this with Jenna. Like, I didn't talk about this thing, but it's also super important for hydration. It's glucose or some form of sugar. We're so terrified today. Like, oh my gosh, sugar, it's going to kill us all. Right. And so it's like, so many parents are like, well, just drink a Gatorade Zero. If your athlete's truly trying to rehydrate in the heat of Texas summer, you need some sugar to actually activate being able to utilize for your body to use and put into play all of those electrolytes that we just talked about. So
I started packing fruit snacks. For in between games, because when you guys brought up the sugar, and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm always like, here, here's the fruit, here's this, here's that. And I was like, fruit snacks, that's so fast.
Yeah. And you only have so much threshold. So when we think about, we use glucose that's active in the bloodstream. When you think about carb loading, which most athletes think about the night before, they're carb loading. Well, what they're doing is they're storing in their muscles and in their liver, they're packing away glucose in its storage form, which is glycogen. And then when they go into intense exercise, they tap into those glycogen stores to be able to keep their body moving. The moment those glycogen stores exhaust themselves, they have to switch to their source of fuel. So the body's gas tank no longer can fuel by glucose. It has to now fuel by fat. And that process burns more calories and takes more energy from the body. So can athletes do it? Yes, your best endurance athletes can run out of their glycogen stores and efficiently fuel. But does it cost a lot more in metabolic return and what you have to make up and then have to kind of repack and restore? Absolutely. So again, for most of our young kiddos, they're going to be tapping into those glycogen stores. They're wanting to rehydrate. They need some form of glucose to be able to do that. But to your point, they don't need it before 45 minutes. Yeah. And my youngest is the worst at this. He's like, he's worked out for 15 minutes and he's like, I need to drink a Gatorade. And I'm like, no, son, you need some water and that's about it. Yeah.
He doesn't have to have all his baseball swag on with the prime.
Yeah. He's got to have all 17 things in a prime. Well, can we talk about prime? Sorry. I love prime. I'm probably going to get in trouble for this, but one of the things that and I won't name names, but there are some electrolyte beverages out there that are super high in one of those 5 nutrients that we talked about, but maybe not high enough in sodium or high enough in potassium. And so I would figure out what your athlete needs and then just make sure they have a pretty decent range of distribution of all of those: sodium, potassium, chloride, phosphorus, calcium, because if not, they're not benefiting you. And there is one specific one, and I won't call out names, but it does not have enough sodium to actually be a rehydration beverage for athletes. So
interesting.
Be looking for that.
No calling out names. We don't want to get shut down. Not yet. All right. Why don't you talk to us a little bit about creatine then? Because when we had the conversation with Jessica the other day, you guys brought up some really awesome information about creatine, and I think it might be a little bit more.
Yeah. And this is one, like, I'll be honest, I don't know, Lindsay, that I was sold on creatine until more recently when I started doing just a bit more research in this space. But ultimately, like, if you're like, what is creatine and what does it do? It enhances the body's ability to produce energy, and it helps after high intensity exercise to help with muscle recovery. It's going to increase muscle energy production. So it boosts the level of phosphocreatine in our muscles, which basically helps regenerate ATP, which is how we build or form energy in the body. It allows us to have greater strength, power, and endurance during short bursts of physical activity. And research has shown this in a really powerful way. It can help. Research has also shown that it's helped with promoting muscle growth and strength and enhancing recovery, the most recent research that's been fascinating to watch, and again, nutrition's a new science, so I'm sure we'll see a lot more in this space, is supporting brain and neurological health, cognitive function. Even some of the research has shown they've been using it post TBI, traumatic brain injury, to help with brain healing and recovering, which has been super fascinating.
That's amazing.
And then just really ultimately, like, I think years ago, probably 10 years ago, we used to say like, oh, creatine's great for adults, but we don't know if it's great for kids.
Right.
And more research has come out to show really the safety and efficacy of being able to use it in kids. I wouldn't start before probably 12, 13.
Okay.
And again, that goes back to because so much happens and
Yeah.
change and growth
Yeah.
with these kiddos. Like, I would say you're going to see, I cannot reiterate this enough. Watching my oldest son, who's now 16, and all of his friends from 12, 13 to now, how much just through natural hormonal development and puberty has changed. You can use it during those times, but I wouldn't start it probably before 12 or 13 years of age.
Yeah, I think that's a great point of reference too, just because, you know, their intensity with sports too changes drastically at that point.
Yes.
So, all right, I love that. How about caffeine and energy drinks? What are your thoughts on
Yeah, again, this goes back to like just being really safe and careful. I think basically nothing more than about 200 milligrams per serving when you're talking about caffeine. With many young kids, so middle school, high school athletes, I mean, it's already going to naturally be like my son, if he could be, he would be a Dr. Pepper fiend. So he would love to drink that if I would let him. That's already going to naturally have caffeine in it. And you know, a lot of things nowadays, just packaged products can oftentimes have caffeine in sneaky ways that we don't know. Again, it can disturb sleep. It can cause us to have like rapid heartbeat. And then you can just over intake the recommended daily amount if you're consuming caffeine from a lot of different sources. So I would say, can athletes use it? Again, I mean, I used it when I was CrossFit competing. As an adult, I was drinking just a small like Coke or Diet Coke before I would work out to help improve VO2 max. The research is there. It is helpful. I would just make sure as a parent, you're really keeping an eye on the total amount of caffeine.
I think that's something that is important you brought up, because kids are really great at sneaking things and hiding things, or, you know, especially when they get their driver's license and they can stop at a gas station and buy a few Monsters in the morning or get a few energy drinks that it can be scary how much they are consuming. And a lot of kids, that is their go-to for every morning before school. And so just having those real conversations with athletes and with your kids, even if they're not an athlete, about the dangers of using energy drinks and consuming too much of it, because that is something that we see in the schools. We do see a lot of kids that are just consuming way too much energy drinks.
Yeah. And I think, again, we talked about like it's up to 400 milligrams for adults. I would say 200 to 300 is the sweet spot. For kids, most of the science is saying around 100 milligrams. That's super easy to get to. Like, I mean, that's like an energy drink or two is 400 milligrams. I mean, most of these energy drinks have upwards of like 300 to 400. So if your kid's even drinking one energy drink a day, they're getting 4 times the recommended dose of caffeine that they should be getting. And I think we've just only yet to see what are the long-term consequences of that. And caffeine, just like any stimulant, can have withdrawal effects. Like you stop taking caffeine, you have headaches, you have all of these like symptoms. And so just being aware of that and what it means for the long-term health implications of your kiddo. And then creatine, we didn't mention dosage, but I just want to circle back on that. So like there used to be this whole thing of loading phase or non-loading phase. I would say for most kiddos, you're looking for 3 to 5 grams of creatine per day. It's pretty safe. And you want creatine monohydrate. I cannot stress that enough. Most effective, most readily bioavailable. And so that's what I would lean towards if you're looking for a creatine. There's a lot of different creatines out there, but I would look for a creatine monohydrate. And then the jury's still out. We need to circle back with Jess because I love the Create gummies. Like, we love those. And I've been looking at third-party testing. So we will circle back, and we need to do a whole episode on probably with Jess on all the different types of creatine gummies. Because they're so popular with kiddos. And we'll circle back on that one with you.
I really do want to know before I, start
purchase. Before you spend.
Absolutely. Okay. So the last one, I know even your face just taught your, it's like, if you could see Stacy's face right now, when I say what it is that I'm going to ask her about, it's pre-workout supplements.
What I often see with pre-workout supplements is I will see a kiddo who will come to me and they're not eating breakfast. They're eating a terrible lunch. They may or may not have an afternoon snack throughout their day. And this is on a school day. And then they come home really quickly before they have to go back for a 4 or 5 o'clock practice or game. And they're trying to, after they have not eaten enough calories for breakfast, lunch, or snack in the morning, use a pre-workout supplement supplement to give them energy to get through their practice. And my first red flag is if they were eating like they should be, they would already have sort of the sustained energy that they would need to go into practice. The second is, again, a lot of times these pre-workout beverages can carry caffeine. Again, going back to caffeine, they can carry a lot of nutrients that we're not wanting to, even unwanted substances, because they're, again, not well regulated, that might be harmful or not tested for safety for our kiddos. And then they can cause increased metabolism, which then if you've already got a kid who's not eating breakfast, lunch, and snack, and they just boosted their metabolism, now they've got to make up all their daily calories after they get done with that practice or game and at dinner. And it's unlikely. And I will tell you, those are the kiddos that I see coming to me going, why can't I gain any weight?
Yeah.
And they're trying to stack on
why am I so tired?
Yep. And they're trying to stack on all these supplements. And the reality is like the supplements are not helping you. I want to say, like, this pre-workout supplement isn't actually helping you, and it's actually deterring your goals. You'd be better off eating a pre-workout snack that was giving you good nutrition and eating breakfast and lunch.
Yeah.
So that's my soapbox on that.
And I think that all comes back to why it's so important for athletes to have a nutritionist.
Yeah. Well, we're looking for these magic pills.
Look, if it's a science, go to the scientist, go to the doctor. A nutritionist and a dietitian are the missing piece, I think, for optimal performance.
Yeah. And
because if you don't know how your body's working.
I think for parents, for kids, it's like we want the quick fix and we want the rapid solution. Like we want this Band-Aid. And I can't stress this enough of like, if you haven't met with someone to talk about like, what's your overall eating pattern? What's a 3-day food recall look like for you? Tracking and measuring how many calories you are taking. If you're looking at every day, like are your macros, 20% carbs when they really need to be closer to 60, and then you're getting way too much protein, and so trying to stuff down all that protein is actually inhibiting you from getting enough total calories. Again, like this overall view of your dietary pattern and approach is going to be so much more powerful than any gimmick or supplement could ever be.
And I love that in the book you go into such great detail about all this. Reading the book after we finished it and it was published, and looking at it as through a mom's lens of an athlete, I've said it before, it changed how I handle meals and what I prepare and what I have available for the kids every day. But additionally, there's a student companion journal for the athletes where they can write down all of their daily record of what they consumed, or they can look at the companion journal goes with the book. And I think that's a really good tool.
And just making sure you're personalizing it. I can't stress this enough, whether it's for adults or kiddos. We did an episode about the difference between what nutrition parents need versus like the nutrition they're giving their athletes, which is completely different. And sometimes because the parents are getting all this information or misinformation, they're distorting that to kids. I had a great conversation yesterday with someone at the baseball fields, and she shared with me Roberta Anding, who used to be the dietitian for the Dallas Cowboys, who's a friend and colleague of mine. And her daughter's actually now a dietitian for the Texas Rangers. She talked about how Roberta came and spoke to her daughter's school when she was in elementary school, and the power of the words we use around food. So understanding these, but then also being really aware of the verbiage that we're using. So we're not using like junk food or these really negative words that to the episode we had, Lindsay, they create eating disorders. And the last thing you want to have in your home is a disordered way to look at food. Like we should see food as fuel. We should see food as all of the great things that it is and not be fearful of it. But there's also no magic bullet. It really is about this like overall approach. The reason why I was getting at this is like, it's important that it's personalized, because what you might need for one kiddo, like I think about my kiddos, and one's 16 and one's going to be 12. And what they need, even in supplement levels, is different. What they need in protein intake for the day is different. And it can be really difficult if you're not informed as a parent on how to navigate those conversations so that you don't create an unintended consequence with an eating disorder. Like for me, it's always something I'm very aware of because mine have two very different body builds. My little one's built like me. My older one's built like my husband. Like talking through these things in a way that's really positive is also important. So that needs to be another episode that we do.
Absolutely. Especially because it's going to set the kids up to be successful when it comes to their food and eating habits throughout the duration of their life.
Yeah, for their life.
I think that's the whole goal.
Yeah. And I'm watching you do that with your boys, and I'm loving it so much because I see them like asking for, and this is always was my dream with Starting Span of like, I still do work in grocery retail. I've been here 11 years. And like my aspiration when I came to grocery retail in 2014 was like, great, I'm going to have access to change the diets of every single Texan because we're going to market all these healthy foods. But the reality is first you have to have the demand.
Yes.
But demand starts early, and it starts with us teaching our kids about these foods that are good for them, teaching them that vegetables taste great, that fruit tastes great, that like these lean, healthy proteins like taste great, and that they can feel really good about these things, and their bodies feel really good when they do them.
And they have the energy, and they're able to, make it through long practices. And we do because of you, right? Like the kids will they'll ask for snacks. And I'm like, yeah, you can have that. You haven't had that. No. They're excited about it because they're making smart decisions. Like they ask for water. We don't have soda in my house.
They're like empowered to make good decisions. And they don't even realize it's a good decision because it's like become part of just what you do.
Yes. And, knowing that, okay, well, August is going to have a whole lot more during his day than he's going to because
their days look so different.
Their schedule's different. The intensity of the sports is different. And then they see me and they're like, are you not going to have that? I'm like, baby, I'm not working out. I don't need any carbs right now. Like, I don't need that type of carbs. I have,
I'm going to have my fiber. I'm going to have this thing over here. Yeah.
So they're even seeing the difference of like, oh, mom, I'm making the same meal, but that one meal is built around August. And then I differentiate it for tea, and then I pull back based on what I need.
Yeah. I mean, you portion and you figure out it's the same meal, but it's like portion sizes. And it's, And so I think there's such a cool thing in that too, of like, even when we talk about this with a lot of our athletes, like, unfortunately, also what I see is, and there's a whole Facebook page dedicated to this, a gentleman I know who runs this page, and it's all about basically post athletes leaving their sport and they gain a lot of weight because what it took for them to maintain the calories and energy level was just this whole different dietary, they could eat whatever they wanted. And now they're like, oh, wait.
Well, have you seen?
Because they never really learned how to do it in a healthful manner.
Because they were always, and their diets were so high calorie. Have you seen pictures lately of, and I love him, JJ Watt. Have you seen JJ Watt?
No.
Okay. So if you were to look at him now versus when he was playing for the Texans, he is just so much smaller and still beautiful. By the way, JJ.
If you're listening, JJ, we adore you.
I mean, we love your wife too. I love your wife, and your kids are so cute. Congratulations on the new baby.
Oh my gosh. Are they not the most adorable family?
Adorable family.
And their servant heart is
yes. But like seeing when he used to post like what he would eat, because we had like JJ Watt Day at school, right? So you could see like his menu that he would post. And then I guarantee you, if we were to talk to him today, it's so drastically different. And then another one of my favorites is Jason Kelsey, Travis. Look, I love Taylor.
I love me some Taylor. I'm going to be honest. Okay, like, don't you even hate on her. She's like my favorite.
And Travis is, great for him, he wonderful, but his brother is hilarious. And there's just something about his wife is
wholesome nature of
Look at pictures of him now and videos of him now compared to when he was playing. That man is not eating what he was eating when he was playing football. I think kids don't necessarily like understand that your nutrition and what you need, the number of calories you need in a day is going to change over the course of a year based on, are you in season?
Yeah.
Are you in training? Are you in post season and you're getting to give your body some recovery time? Everything changes. So I love that you're
and having always a really positive relationship with food as those things change. Those things are going to change. Our needs amongst a family are going to look different. Our needs and seasons of life are going to look different. But how do we, from a young age, even from the time that mothers are thinking about conceiving their babies, like really think about nutrition and its implications to
I don't even know how long we've been talking. Probably our longest podcast yet. But I'm just going to go off on this because I need you to do this. As a mother, as a woman who was pregnant, not a single person ever tells us about what we should be eating during pregnancy.
Oh, we'll bring on an expert. Let's chat about this.
Why do we not get, when we're pregnant and you're going to your OBGYN, why is there not a nutritionist that sits down with women for their first pregnancy and goes through that with them?
Oh,
Because
not unless you have
shouldn't-
gestational diabetes.
Yeah,
Then,
but
yeah.
shouldn't there be somebody? Wouldn't that be amazing?
We're starting a whole nother
A
podcast
whole
on
nother
the
podcast.
brokenness of our
Yeah.
healthcare system
Seriously.
and where we need
Okay,
help
well,
and
I'm glad
why.
we typed that down in our podcast notes.
Yes, I love it. Oh my gosh.
All right, well, let's wrap up for today so that we don't overwhelm our listeners. So stay tuned for future podcasts where we will bring on exciting guests in the sports world, highlight spotlight coaches, athletic directors, former and current collegiate and professional sports players, sports dietitians, sports psychologists, and more.
What you eat and how you think can transform your athletic performance and overall well-being. Whether you're an athlete, coach, or fitness enthusiast looking to gain that mental edge and optimize your health, this podcast is for you.
Don't forget to join the SPAN community and get more exclusive content by following us on all of our social media channels, including TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and X at @SPAN_athletics.
Until next time, stay faithful, stay fueled, and remain focused on your goals.